Time will tell. Now, we've been talking a lot about potential cuts to tax credits, so the Minister gave nothing away there. So you will simply have to tune in to Tuesday's Autumn Statement, live here on a Daily Politics special, BBC 2 from noon onwards. The government's already made some cuts in the amount of tax credits which can be claimed to pay for childcare. The squeeze on household incomes is one of the factors said to be losing the government the support of women voters. They're getting tax credits cut. They go to the shops and see how high food prices are. They're not happy. Kate Conway reports.
1, 2...
Karen Miller lives with husband Darren and their 4 kids. They both work full-time and spend £4,800 a year on childcare. But with their tax credits cut from £90 to £20 a week, Karen says it may not be worth working.
I always believed, growing up and working my way up through the job roles and work chain, that I would be better off, that I would be able to afford those luxuries, and not to be able to afford those luxuries is really quite shocking, and we do have to consider whether it might be worth one of us not working.
The government's not about to reverse those cuts to tax credits anytime soon, but one MP thinks that you could cut red tape and get a cheaper alternative.
In, for example, small villages and towns where it's hard to get to a local nursery, a mum who's already looking after a couple of children would be able to look after a few of her neighbours' children without having to apply to Ofsted and do a compulsory curriculum with 69 steps, which is what happens at the moment. And if you look at countries like Canada and Germany, that's what they do already.
It's an idea that's got the government's attention, and a smart one when there's no cash for further subsidy of one of the world's most expensive childcare systems. But one organisation that's been researching the effects of childcare costs on low to middle income families is warning about the downsides of cheap childcare.
It's really about having well-trained, qualified staff who understand child development and who can provide rich input to children, so that if they're there for 4 to 8 hours a day, they're not just sat there doing nothing, they're really getting some child development input that really helps them progress and learn.
I'd rather pay for my daughter to go to a childminder. Evie gets such a lot in terms of early education that I know that when she goes to school she'll be able to learn at a much faster rate than children that haven't had that social skill input.
And Karen has a message for politicians hoping they can win over women voters. I want to work. Please help me.
I really do think that we're going back 20, 30 years to where it's a presumption that women will stay in the household, and that's just, you know, all that work on equality, it's just gone out the window.
Kate Conway reporting. Chris Grayling is still with us. I suppose at a time when living standards are being seriously squeezed because prices, particularly of essentials, rising so much more than wages, which are very low or static, more and more families, both parents are having to go out to work, which makes childcare all the more important. But childcare is getting tough, as we've seen in the film.
Well, it's absolutely important. And you've got to put in context the changes we've made to tax credits. What we inherited was a system where we were paying tax credits to people earning between £50,000 and £60,000 a year. And our view was, in tough times, you have to draw a line at how far up the income scale you can provide state support. But if you look at what we're doing through the childcare tax credit and the introduction of the universal credit, what we're looking to do for the first time is to allow women who are going back to work, working just a few hours a week, to claim credits for, or to claim support for childcare in a way that wasn't possible previously. So, yeah, we unashamedly have said we can't do everything for everyone, but we have actually strengthened support for people at the bottom end of the scale.
I mean, I take the difficulties because you've got no money, basically, though you have managed to find £1 billion for a job scheme. But what if you listen to the people on our film there? They want to work. They have to work because they are the squeezed middle. But they can't get the childcare. I mean, what can you say to them?
Well, we are providing, through the tax credit system, support for childcare. That hasn't changed. You know, we will continue to provide support for childcare. But equally, we've got to recognise that in difficult times financially, there are limits to how much we can provide.
No, I understand
the changes we made to tax credits at the top end of the income scale was just a hard decision to say we can't use tax credits to support people earning more than £50,000 a year.
Well, a lot of the people you took that away from think of themselves as the squeezed middle too. Is this one of the reasons why the Conservatives have a problem with women?
I think it absolutely is. And to say the change that happened this April, which is that you can now claim back less of your childcare than you used to be able to claim if you're on working tax credits, for a lot of mothers who were only just thinking it's worth working anyway, and maybe feeling a bit guilty about working anyway and a bit torn about working, you reach a point where you're actually paying to work.
Yes.
You do start resenting the government at that point. And as
Why
you
don't
can
you
see
just
the
stay
lady
home and
saying
look
in
after
the
the
film,
kid?
you know, it's saying feeling forced to go back and look after the kids, even if that's not what you want to do, and feeling that, you know, government wants all women to be in the home, and that's not necessarily what government intended. But I think the result is either women not working because it's not worth their while, or black market childcare. You know, that whole thing, cash in hand to a neighbour to look after your kids because it's cheaper, and that's not, you know, a basis on which anyone can plan.
But you're encouraged to do that, you think, the way things are going?
The more expensive childcare has risen above inflation this year, and wages have not risen by as much as inflation.
What's your take?
I have no take on childcare. I'm a single man at age 34.
I still have an opinion.
But on the sheer politics of it, I do find it intriguing that David Cameron personally and the government in general is now seen to be very weak among women voters. Alex Salmond in Scotland had a similar predicament.
You're his biographer, aren't you?
Indeed, and just in the run-up to the May election this year, he appeared on Women's Hour, he engaged with Mumsnet, and it was essentially...
And he gave every woman a gold bar.
Well, it's something short of that. But it was a PR exercise, essentially. And I just wonder if David Cameron might be considering an appearance on Mumsnet and Women's Hour.
Oh, I think we can certainly say that that's going to happen. We won't ask Mr. Grayling's not in charge of the Prime Minister's schedule. Is it just economically impossible to allow childcare to be tax deductible?
Well, I mean, I think there's a number of things. If you look at the various ideas and pressures and suggestions that government's receiving, of which that's one,
It's expensive,
of course there are people who argue for that. But the reality is we are dealing with an appallingly difficult financial position. There are many things we might like to do, many things people might argue that we should do, that right now, you know, our real task is to maintain stability in the economy. I think if we were to let rip, and allow borrowing to rise again in the way the Labour Party seems to want us to do, the consequence would be that we would end up with the kind of financial pressures that we're seeing in other European countries. And I do not want us to go there, because my view is that will end up with more people out of work than we've got at the moment.
OK, but you have a women problem, don't you?
Well, I think it's up to us to win the support of voters, both male and female, over the next 3.5 years.
All right.
To demonstrate that we are listening and thoughtful, but also to say there are tough decisions we have to take.
We hear that mantra every day. Thank you very much, Mr. Grayling.